Hello, welcome to Alpha Anywhere Demo and Q&A. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm in charge of documentation at Alpha Software, and I'm happy to be here with Dion McCormick. Is it Premier Solutions Engineer? Apologies, Dion. Anyway, we're here to do a presentation today. Dion's going to give a presentation on some new and existing functionality in Alpha Anywhere, and we're also here to answer your questions. So if you want to type your questions into the GoToWebinar questions panel, we'll take a look at those and answer them after Dion gives his presentation. So without further ado, Dion.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today. I'm going to go ahead and if you make me presenter, or I'll just make myself presenter. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
We'll do that. How about that? Is that coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, thank you everybody. We really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. As usual, we are here for you and we want to share some really cool new capabilities with Alpha that are in the pre-release. I want to show you that. And I think you'll like them because it's all about enhancing your productivity and continually making the development environment something that really just allows you to do what you need to do faster, easier, and simpler. Now, we are also all here for your questions, so take the time to go to your Q&A panel on your GoToWebinar control panel and put in any questions. Sarah will be keeping an eye on those, both on the topics we talk about here and also on other topics that you may have an interest in. We'll also, we appreciate it, when people send things in guides. We are working on, we have a little bit of backlog now because we have some great topics that came in through guides we're working through, and we appreciate that with folks, and we're going to be trying to get through those. If you can, send those to us. It gives us a little time to prepare and be able to help you and do a better job in our demonstrations so they don't blow up as badly as they sometimes will. No, it's always fun when you're doing things on the fly, but we like to prepare and be prepared for your kind of questions there. And also, I like to always mention that on Tuesdays, we have Transforms Tuesday. We just had a fabulous, amazing Transforms Tuesday last week. It had to do with how to do reporting on forms and information that come through Transform, which is critical. Is there's sort of like Transform is amazing for creating data collection systems, and now even more powerful, there's really some cool new techniques to get that information back out into a actionable format that can be used by other people and used there. There's always been the API and capabilities for you to move data in and out of Transform, but now there's just some amazing user-centric reporting capabilities that have been developed. And what's interesting is a lot of those depend on some of these new features that are being built into the Alpha Anywhere platform. So it's a symbiotic relationship in terms of Alpha Transform needs some capabilities. Those capabilities come into Alpha Anywhere. They get developed, tested, implemented, and now those are now available in the base product, which is really cool there. And there's so many neat things going on right now. There's some really cool basic fundamental features that are being developed and worked on by the team. We saw a little bit of that at the DevCon. Speaking of DevCon, there is now an announcement for the new one there. And actually, let me jump over. Maybe I got it here. Let's go here. Bear with me. But there's a website now and a early registration for the new DevCon, and it's really exciting. It's got, again, going to have a lot of great content. So let's go to Alpha Anywhere. I think there's a page on there. I'm not sure if we've added a page. I think there's a page on there. I apologize. I should have been prepared for this, as you can see here. So let's see if we've put it here. Well, we have DevCon 2020, but we've got 2021 being announced. So very exciting stuff there. So, if you haven't already signed up, we'll be signing up very soon or now, and we'd love to have you attend. Not only will we be having in-depth sessions and training and other pieces there, but beyond that, we'll be having roadmap and other meet and talk to the developers. Really valuable. We got really good feedback and reviews from 2020, and now 2021 is going to be even better. Again, hopefully across the board on everything, but in particular on DevCon for Alpha Anywhere. So that's where we're at there. Today, I want to spend a few minutes talking about a couple new capabilities that have been built into Alpha. They're really, again, productivity tools that are there. While I'm doing that, please ask questions about that, and also feel free to ask other questions, and Sarah will look through and make sure we can try to address them as much as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into my development environment here. Note, I am a huge fan of the Universal Installer. Been talking about that lately, and you'll notice that I'm using it both with a couple different products. I'm using Developer Edition. This is kind of the stable product. So I've got a certain, I've got the 6699, which is a very popular build. It's a good, as I like with wine, it's a good vintage. But there's updates, an official stable build. This is sort of your production builds. And I can just update it right here if I want. But for now, I'm kind of using that. But more importantly, I've got my application server stable build. And last but not least is my Developer Edition, which is our nightly build. And as you can see, my latest one, yeah, it looks like I do have an update. So there's a new update, but I'm going to use the one that I have in there. So I'm already using this a lot in terms of managing the ability to do both production kind of work and also experimental work with that. And I'm doing it on the same machine. You just have to be careful to kind of segment your workspaces so you don't accidentally open up and add some features with a new development build or Developer Edition and try and use it on production. You just got to be a little careful on there. But this makes it a lot easier than it used to be, and I really use it a lot. So it's pretty good there. So I've already gone in and launched the Developer Edition because I want to show you some of these features that are in the pre-release. And as we mentioned before, if you're interested in pre-releases, and this is before, not today, so I'll go here and go to pre-release notes, and I'm going to copy this and paste it into the chat window. Oh, good. By the way, Sarah has put in the early bird registration link for 2021. A great deal. It's the only way to fly. If you're intending on going, now's the time to sign up. So this is it's in the chat window of GoToWebinar. So we can see here, there's a couple, not a lot of there, but there's some other things I want to cover here. But this is the video or the web page that talks about the different newer capabilities and features. We've already talked about the PDF viewer control, and we spent a lot of time on that last week and then trying the week before. And we've also gotten some really good feedback from everybody. We really appreciate people taking it and experimenting with it and giving us your feedback. So that one's in pre-release there. There's a whole bunch of other kind of new features here in the list control we'll be covering in the near future. Things like, in-place editing, and there. Again, around that, which I want to note is that the list control continues to enhance in capability and functionality to really rival the grid control, which is a very mature, great component because it's easy and fast to do things. But you'll notice that the list control is really rapidly advancing and including a lot of capabilities that you've seen in terms of the grid control. So very excited about that because, again, lists, when they're implemented, look better, operate better, they're mobile, they're responsive, they're really the way to go for you. And I would explore and see if you can use that first. If not, the grid's always available, but this is available from there. Now, I'm going to show a couple cool new features. So I'm going to jump into Alpha here. I have a very simplistic application here, workspace. I haven't done much. I basically have an index page. And let's say I built a whole system, and that system importantly uses web security and other pieces there. Well, there's limited capabilities when you're working on things. Let me go ahead and open this up here. So within here, we've always had the ability for you to do a working preview and or a live opens up. I also some lag time on there. So I've got a very simple UX component here that has some controls, has some button and things along those lines. We've always had the ability for you to just click working preview and do a working preview. That happens within the development environment, so it's really nice for debugging and other pieces, but there may be elements of rendering CSS and stuff like that. So we've also had what's called live preview. And what live preview does is that it creates a little test folder, is it there, and then runs it off the built-in development server, and therefore considered a higher fidelity of how you would review and test things. And you still have a lot of advantages in live preview in terms of debugging and stuff like that, but it just ties a lot of the pieces together. one of the key conditions is that when you're in live preview, you can test some of the security functionality and file upload functionality and other things that depend on a web browser to do that. Working preview is an internal structure to show you the information. Live preview is actually using the full web browser capabilities to do that. Now, the cool thing about that is it's been in there, it works, use it a lot, but you're limited to this one control, this one UX here. But what if you wanted to test your own whole application? Well, what you need to do in that case traditionally is that you would have a publishing profile, and I'll go up here to my profiles, and I'd have my local web root, I'd create a folder, and then I'd publish my app. Once it's published, I'd go into my web browser and I'd open it up and run it in my local folder using the development server. So, there's a couple extra steps, and it works great, and it works fine, and we used it for time, but it's sort of like extra stuff you need to do. And extra stuff always takes a little more time, and if you think about over weeks and months of developing, that stuff adds up. So in the latest release, the team has added a new button here called Live Test. And this basically, as it shows on the screen, you'll see in a moment, I hope there's not much of a lag, you'll be able to test the web project on the develop server. So essentially, this automates that process of publishing and launching for you so that you don't have to go through those steps for yourself. Now, super important is when you're live testing, it also is going to do things like check your security, make sure everything's set there. It's going to use security when you publish so you can see what's going on there.
Hello, Dion. Your audio has dropped out.
Up a publishing profile and doing all those other things that are associated with that, you just basically click that button now and it'll go. Now, it does a couple nice things. Is, for instance, let's say my developer server is off and it's not being used at this time here. So now I can hit live test. It's going to ask me that, but it's going to do some checks and say, hey, before I can do a live test, I need to start your server. Do you want to? Yes. And again, you can disable this, by the way, so you don't have it done twice. So it's starts.
Hello, Dion. Dion, can you hear me? Sorry, folks. It sounds like the audio
then publishes it and runs it all there. It takes a little second more to get this because it's still ramping up the server, but it does.
Hello, Dion.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Again, golly, me and network connections. Crazy. Is this getting any better here?
I can't tell if your audio is caught up yet or not.
I'm hearing you coming through loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, your audio has been it seems to cut out every time you click like a live test or a working preview button. So I'm wondering if that just pausing while that is running would help.
Interesting. I wonder it might be a network thing or something like that. Well, I'll try not to do that anymore and keep it very simple. And then when I do click stuff, I'll stop talking so it can catch up from there. Are you hearing me okay? Or
it's okay, yeah. Yeah.
So
it just seems to lag
that
a
is
bit.
called live preview, and that's now available. Yeah, I think it's just overall network connections. I'm in a remote location and the network's still being built out here, and I'm doing Wi-Fi versus wired and things like that. So that's live test. It's available in pre-release for you to check out. Again, the beauty of it is it really helps you speed up your development process. So it allows you to take out a few steps. It does a lot of the checking for you and everything else, takes care of your security stuff, making sure security is enabled, and you're good to go. So that's live test. It's available now. You can use the universal installer to bring in and use those pieces here. So the next step I'd like to show is a really cool feature, and it's kind of a harbinger, I guess that's spelling. It's kind of showing you kind of where things are going. And this is really neat. And actually, they've done 2 iterations of it very quickly that I want to mention in there. And it's the ability to publish what's called a static HTML version of your UX. So let's take a scenario here, and it's actually in the documentation they talk about this, is that let's say you're developing a test component here. And so I've developed that test component, and maybe you're early in the development cycle, meaning that you're just kind of roughing out the user interface. You don't have all the functionality in there, but you've got the layout going pretty good and those things along those lines. So with that in mind, you want to share it with someone. You want to share it with your client, with a business user or someone who's going to use it and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. And, I want you to be able to do it, but you don't want to have to go set up a server and then publish it to that server and do all those other things. You just want a quick and dirty way of getting your stuff in the hands of someone else. And given the fact that it's not going to have the full functionality of the app, but it's more of just showing the user interface element. So we've always had the ability to do what's called create static files or static HTML, which is what
Dion, your audio has dropped out again.
Alpha will do is it will take this UX you see here on the screen, and it will render it as a set of HTML files and JavaScript and everything else, so you could put it on a web server and see what it looks like. Did I lose you?
You did lose us.
Sarah, did I lose you?
You did, yeah. Your audio dropped out, and then
is everybody else hearing the same thing, or
yeah,
or
we're all experiencing the same thing. Do you think maybe calling in by phone might help?
Yeah, I'll do that real quick. Give me 1 minute.
Yeah. Apologies, folks, for the audio problems today. Oh, while we wait for Dion to come back,
I'm
there
back.
was a question. Oh, you're back.
Hear me
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you. Yep. The quality isn't as
Let's give
great,
this a try.
but we can hear you now. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So to back up just a moment, this feature has been in the tool for many years, or for a long time, and has been used in different situations. But this really is one of those enhancements, which is going to take it to the next level. So in this case, when you load up a UX, you go to the menu, and in here you'll see basically it's a menu item under the menu that says create static HTML files. And previously when we select this, it asks you a few questions, but then it would download to a local folder a set of static HTML files that you could then put onto a server and then show that operation. But now it's improved. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Okay. So first, there's a component alias. You can edit that, although you don't need to. Secondly, it's going to have a local folder and the name of that. So it kind of asks you a few questions. You can change that if you don't like that particular folder, etc. You can include additional assets and other information. So this just a little fine tuning if you want to add more behaviors and capabilities to it. It also has this after file set is created, meaning once it's gone through and created all this, then the question is opening in the browser. So I'm going to look at that real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and do that, but I'm going to just deselect this item right here, which is kind of cool. And that's upload files to S3 storage. That is the newer feature that's built into it, which is really cool. This ability to, once you have created those set of files, you can upload those files to a bucket on Amazon S3. So this takes it to the next step, which is really cool, that not only can you just automatically put them onto a folder and then do it, you can actually put them on Amazon S3 and then give someone a URL to that S3 storage location. So let me do that. Now, the important thing is when you do that, you would normally give it a storage connection string. And let me jump out real quick because I want to show you where that's at. This is really sluggish, so I got to be a little careful on how I'm doing this stuff here. But in the Web Projects Control Panel, if you go to tools, and it may lag a moment, storage connection strings, this is very similar to an alpha DAO connection string. Basically, it's a way to point to a cloud-based storage solution. So an alpha DAO connection string points to a database. The storage connection string points to an alpha DAO connection string, or to, I'm sorry, a cloud storage. And when you have on there, you can create a new storage, and you have different options. So we, the primary one we tend to do is Amazon S3, but you can also include Azure. So if you're doing a little bit there, and even SharePoint, although I haven't done much work on that. It's usually Amazon 3 or Azure. But you go in here and you put in all information about that cloud account, and then Alpha now knows how to talk and put things up and take things down from that cloud-based storage environment. So in order for me to create and upload S3 previously, I'd have to go in here, configure all the storage connection string stuff, get that set up, build it out, and then once I'm done, then I can actually go and do the deployment there. So give this a second as it kind of catches up here.
We are still waiting for that to catch up.
Yeah, it's taking a moment there. There we go. So I'm going to go back in here, and then we'll go and create static HTML, and here. So once it catches up, you'll see in a moment I'm back in the static HTML files screen, and I've got my storage connection string. I would then go select that storage connection string that I created before, and now it would know where, what S3 bucket and everything else on it. But in the new pre-release, there is a new and improved, which is if you select Alpha software, and here's the information here. Well, the beauty of that is Alpha will automatically create an S3 bucket for you and provision it and do everything for you. So you don't have to actually go get all that thing set up, which is really nice because it's just, again, one less thing you need to do. Now, caveat is it's a Alpha S3 bucket. So if you have any security considerations or concerns, you're going to want to set up your own buckets, publish there on S3 versus or Azure, whichever one you want to use. And you probably won't want to use this one, again, because it is, again, an Alpha S3 bucket. So, you don't have the control you have there. But if you're just kind of don't really care, you're just kind of doing a quick thing there, do that. Once you've set up this information, including any enhancements there, I'm going to click OK. In a moment, what it's going to do is review my UX. And it's going to give me a warning. It's going to say, hey, we already have a bunch of stuff in that folder. So it's going to overwrite it. Do you want me to overwrite it? So it's a little careful, because you might have it. I'm going to go, yeah, go ahead. And remember, it's going to first download it to this folder. Then it's going to upload it to whatever cloud environment that you want. So it's a two-step process. So I'll click yes. This will go ahead and generate my HTML files. And then now you'll see in a moment, a quick message will come up where it's copied it to S3 and I'm done. You'll notice in here now, here is my URL. So it's already put it on here. And you'll notice this is a Amazon AWS URL. So it's on S3 and it's Alpha Anywhere's static HTML bucket. So again, it's on Alpha's there, but you notice I didn't have to set anything up there. Now, the cool thing is now you can take this, and let me go ahead and copy that. Only take a moment because of the slow speed here. I don't want you to have to try and copy it off the screen. But this you can then just send to someone, and when you send that to someone, let's go ahead and copy it. And I'll go ahead and go into the chat window in here. It is slow. And I just want to paste that in the chat window so you can go have some fun with it. Wow, maybe it's it's not letting me open the chat window. Doesn't like it. I'm trying to get that there. There we go. So if you'll see, I've pasted into your chat window in the GoToWebinar control panel the URL that is shown here, and feel free to, there's no malware or anything like, but I can type things. But even for instance, in the Click Me, I added an action JavaScript, and you'll notice when I click on it, it says you clicked me here, and that you clicked me here is a action JavaScript. So there's limited functionality. You can actually demonstrate and do stuff. You can do navigation page to page. So a really cool use of this is before you do a whole bunch of development work, lay out your A5W, your UX control, lay out the navigation, those like simple kind of elements there, put in your graphics and everything else. Then you can publish it, send someone a URL, and they can kind of play with it in a limited fashion. And once you're, essentially it's like a live wireframe capability. And then once you're in a live wireframe, then you're in a beautiful situation to say, yeah, you approve that. And if they approve that, then you now have locked down your user interface, and then you can go into adding more components and other things like that. And if you want to, like if you put a list control in there, you can put some static data in there just to show what it would look like. So it's not data driven and other things like that. But it's a really cool feature, and it's really going to be helpful in those early parts of your project where you're roughing out screens and stuff, and you just want to show someone something. And it's so much more interesting because in here, you'll see that it's got certain live attributes to it. So in versus a series of static like diagrams or wireframes, you can actually send to them the information, and they can actually click through it. They can see what it would look like. They can do some limited interactions with it. And the beauty of that is you're in really good shape as far as them seeing what the end product will look like. And if you need to make a change, you just go into Alpha, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to go Click Me, and I'm just going to go Click Me Now. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to say, oh, I've changed that button that you asked me to do. I'm going to create static HTML files. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It's going to warn me to overwrite. I can get rid of that warning message, by the way, if you don't care, taking one less click away from it. And I wonder, I wonder if it gives it a different URL. But now that new version is up there, you can see it's up there. It's got the Click Me Now. Interesting. I think it's the same URL. Do a refresh on your site and see if it may change this numbering. I'm not sure. Looks pretty similar. So I think it is the same URL. Yeah. So the cool thing about that is then you can just say, oh, yeah, I posted a new update. Go check it out. And then they can go check it out, refresh their URL, and have the new version. And that way you can accelerate that communication between you and the client. And what's more importantly about it is, since it is what it will be when it finally gets published, you're in a situation where the fidelity of what you're going to deliver is going to be what is actually fine, both in the testing phase or validation or approval phase and the end phase there. So that is called the ability to publish static HTML. The really cool new, as I mentioned, was published to Amazon S3. And now that you can publish to Amazon S3, it makes it very simple to share with people and be able to show people and do things along those lines. So give it an experiment. It's really fun. It's easy to use. And I'm starting to use it in terms of working with clients in terms of, hey, do you want to see what it's going to look like, get an idea of what it is? And, in certain situations, most likely what people do is they do wireframes and then they go in and do development work. Well, you can kind of merge those together so you can actually use this as a wireframe building tool and take that whole step out of it so you can refine it very quickly. You got to be careful because if you have a lot of behavioral stuff, you don't want to get down into the weeds before you've kind of structured everything. But I'll leave that up to you. You obviously know what you're doing from that standpoint there. But thank you. Sarah has put into the chat window the Create Static HTML Files document. So you can click on there and it explains a little bit more how the process works. But those are the two cool new features that are now in the Alpha Anywhere environment that allows you to be more productive. The live preview capability, which really takes and live previews or live tests your whole application, including security, and now the HTML functionality that allows you to quickly publish something in a static HTML format and go from there. And in the documentation, it kind of tells you the limitations of what you can do with static HTML. But as you can see, it really works nice. It's a fast publish, and I'm finding a really good utility out of it. So I wanted to share that with everybody in the crowd. So that's the two little things I wanted to kind of cover today. And we can open it up to questions, or if you have questions about this or other questions.
There are a few questions in here.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I like that.
So there's one on the live test feature. The question is, do you have to create a separate A5W page for each component you want to test?
No, it's going to automatically generate all that for you. So it's just a simplification of the regular publish process. It just automates that. So no, you don't have to. It will, it does all the regular things it does to, like, when you click, say, load things, it will take care of all that for you.
All right. Give folks a moment to add some questions. There was one earlier about the universal installer. The question was whether or not they had to uninstall Alpha Anywhere first before they could run the installer.
No, it will automatically detect what you already have installed, which is really nice. It checks that already, and then it says, okay, I'll reuse those installation locations for you, so you don't have to restructure and redo everything there. It's a very smart, it should be Alpha Anywhere Smart Installer instead of Universal, because it's smarter than me, for sure. I can guarantee you that. So, and also notice in here, you can click here to get the release notes. There are other things you can do. We've kind of talked about it, but you can actually click on it and reinstall it. Let's say you're seeing something weird, or you can modify the installation, like, certain things you can adjust so it's fine-tuned to exactly how you would install it for your particular situation.
All right, check to see if there's any more questions about the presentation. There are some other questions.
Good.
You covered that one. Okay, so let's move on to some other topics here. This person asks if they want to know if they need to protect their app from SQL injection attacks, and if so, what kind of code would they add to their UX?
Great question. So for the standard UX, like if you are making, and let me go ahead and go back into this. If I go to data binding and I bind my controls to one or more fields, tables and fields, if you're using behind the scenes, Alpha is going to generate the XBasic code and everything else it needs to read, write, update, delete information in those tables. And built into that, it uses the argument concept we've talked about before that will automatically help you prevent injection attacks. So for instance, if it's a numeric field, it's going to make sure you can't put some text in that numeric field. I mean, you might do it in the interface, but it's going to stop it before it actually executes on that, sort of execute that query or update statement or whatever statement is to the back end. So first and foremost, if you're using our sort of user interface building tools that have data binding, you're good to go. There's a lot of checking and things that go on there. Now, if you are going to use if you're going to write your own XBasic, actually, let me just show you an example of that. This is really slow, so I don't know how. Let me go to XBasic and create new. Do I have a AlphaDO connection string? Go ahead and create it real quick. Look at how easy it is. That is to do that. So it'll take a moment. Okay. So I'm going to go to XBasic. I'm going to create a little script here. And so step one is if you're doing a user interface, it's going to take care of that. Step two, I highly recommend that whenever you're doing any kind of XBasic, scripting to talk to the database, you try to use the XBasic SQL Actions code generator. And I'll show you why. First, it saves you time, makes your code consistent. But now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a update action. So I'll go ahead and click that. Okay. So what this is going to do is walk me through a series of steps to write the code to update a record in the database. So the first thing it's going to do, it's going to ask us, what connection string? Where am I going to find this data? So I'm going to click on there. I'm going to select that Northwinds example. It's now going to say what table. So I double click on there and I'm going to use customers. Real quick process check. Is there much lag between what I'm doing and what I'm saying, Sarah?
Oh, right now, no, it's quite smooth.
Okay. If there is, do interrupt me because I know how aggravating that can be for people. So now I've selected what table I want to update. I can select what field. Let's say I just want to update the contact name. And now it's going to ask me what field values. So in this case, if I want to hard code it, I could just put in, the name of the contact there. So I'll just say for right now, for instance, the contact name is going to be John Doe.
And
it's
right
lagging
after you
on my
asked
side.
that, it lagged a bit.
Yeah, so I'll
Wait
go
for it
real
to catch
slow.
up. We're waiting for John Doe
Yeah.
still. And you've opened field values.
Yep, and in there you type in, it's basically mapping what you want to update from that standpoint.
Could you open field values again? It skipped right over it.
Oh, I see it. It finally caught up from there.
It caught up and skipped all the middle bits.
Exactly.
There we go.
Yeah. So you have your contact name. If there's multiple fields, you get an opportunity of it. FYI, obviously that's probably going to be like driven by variables. So just put like a hard-coded example in there for right now. So I just put in something that I kind of anticipate from there. And then the last thing it's asking me is what is the primary key value? And again, that will most likely be a variable when you actually run it, but just put in an example value. So you're kind of just putting in some samples of what you want to do there. So once you've done that and this catches up, you'll see down below it's written my XBasic script for me. So I don't have to do that. It's opening the database, it's setting, I'll walk through the script in a little more details in a moment. Now, the other thing that's important is that you can also include sample code to update the auditing log. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'm not going to add that for right now. Now it's copied that to my clipboard, and you'll see when it catches up in a moment, I'll paste it in. Now I have my script. Now, the reason I went through all that is just to remind you, if you're doing any XBasic coding with databases, that feature is available. It's really nice. It writes very clean and tight code. It's very consistent and makes sure everything's been done. For instance, it puts in the error checking when you open it up, etc. Now you'll notice here's my statement here, and I'm going to go ahead and set line numbers so you can see what I'm talking to. So you'll notice on line 13, it's written that SQL statement to update that. And you'll notice in there that two things. One, it didn't put my exact figures like my John Doe or Alfie in there. Rather, it created arguments. And the other thing it didn't do is do like something where you put in, you build this SQL string through a set of text like this plus the variable. It's using this argument concept. So out of the gate, that's the way to do it. And that helps you prevent SQL injection attacks because, for instance, it will make sure that like if you have a date field, the only thing you can put in there is a date. If you have a text field, only text. If it's a number, only a number. So it really goes a long way towards it. And actually, if you want to code your own, you can just kind of look at how this is done, copy and paste from there. So that is the three levels. First, if you data bind to a UX, it's going to do it automatically behind the scenes. Secondly, if you use this tool, then it will automatically generate code there. And then the third is that if you're writing your own code, make sure you're using arguments in your SQL statements. Don't do something like contact name plus contact name variable plus, and you'll see it'll catch up in a moment. So a lot of people, and this is where it came from, they'll write something along the lines of this, where you build up the SQL statement by putting in variables here. That is dangerous because someone could say, oh, that contact name, instead of putting in there an actual contact, it could put a SQL statement, and then SQL may, depending on the situation, execute that as a separate statement and throw an error and show up some data on the screen. So use arguments. Again, if it's built in, you're good to go. If not, you know, the tools are there to help you write this code effectively and do it the right way.
Okay.
And hopefully it did. Actually, that's what it would look like. Cool. Great question. Thank you very much.
All right. And then for those of you curious, I did post a link to the XBasic Working with SQL data section of the XBasic guide. So definitely take a look there. We talk about more about what kind of commands you can run if you want to get into writing your own. So Dion, here's a related question to all of this. Somebody asked Args.Add or Args.Set. Which one should I use?
Oh, I've only used Args. I honestly don't know the Args.Set stuff. Some kind of enhancements, but as far as, I mean, Args do everything I need to do. So I'd have to look up and get information about Args.Set and see what it really is. Good question.
All right. Perhaps we could talk about that in a,
yeah.
Like just talk about just working with XBasic and SQL in a future webinar.
While you're looking at the next question,
I'm
go to my
looking for the
favorite
next
site.
one.
It's called Args.Set.
SQL argument set.
Oh, okay.
It's the set function. Somebody did ask, when will there be a new stable release?
Oh, I see. I see. If you look at my code, I do Args.Add, but there's also an Args.Set. So, see, it's saying Args. Oh, I think it's after you've defined it's like a way to update Args.Set. I'll have to look into that. It adds or redefines an argument's value. So you could actually, that's interesting. So it has two functions. One is it's like add, where you can say, put a new thing in there, but it also looks like you can update something you've already put in there. I've never had a scenario where I needed that, but you know, that's doable. I think this is important. I'm glad this person asked this question. You'll see something here that says setting an argument to null. Now, in modern databases, you can have null fields. And so this allows you to say, oh, I want to actually insert the null value into that column in that database. So it allows you to set a argument to a null so that when you insert it, it doesn't insert like an empty string or something like that. It actually inserts an official null into the table. That's a really good point.
All right. Somebody did ask, when will the next release be available? That's still not, it's on the roadmap, but it's not anytime soon. Ooh, here's a list question for you, Dion.
Oh, good.
Somebody asked if there's a way to set a temporary initial filter on a list, which could be replaced by a user search criteria later. This person's list is, the initial load is taking way too long because it's trying to download all the data from their table, and they'd like a way to pre-filter that temporarily.
Okay. So interesting. The number one way I usually do this, I'm going to see if I can create it. If it gets too slow, we'll get rid of it here. So what I usually do is I delay the rendering of the list till the search information has been put in there. So when you create a list on a component, this is going to be too slow to try and actually demo at live time. But I will open up and add a list, and eventually it will get there. So it may take a moment for it to catch up, but we'll go ahead and put a list in here. And yeah, it's kind of a combination of everything really slow. So one method is to hide the values and things like that until, don't show the list till they've done the filtering. The beauty of that is that it won't do all that list load, and so you'll be in a situation. The downside of that is that you won't have any records shown when they first go there, so that's not necessarily good. So one method I've used also, this is just taking too long, so I'll talk to it, is that you can go ahead and have the list in it. Well, first and foremost, in the list, you have things like pagination, and you also have list virtualization. So there's some functions that are available in there. And let me try and get to the point where I can show you where those are. So again, this will take a moment to catch up. So what I'm doing is, if you're not seeing it, I'm basically building a list off of the customer table really quick. It's going very slow, so it may take a moment to catch up. But you can also emit a filter function to actually execute a filter on that. So for instance, let me go ahead and get the customers out. I'm almost done doing that. Okay, we'll go to the list layout and we'll go ahead and add these in there. Okay, so I've got my list, that's all great. So a couple of things I want to point out to help speed up your list if there's a ton of stuff in there. First, you can paginate data, and that will only display a page at a time, so it kind of works like a grid. And therefore, when it renders, it's only going to render, say, the first 20 rows. That may or may not be what the person needs. I mean, depending on the user experience that they want there. But there's also another feature into it. If you have larger amounts of data, if you go into the list properties, there's what's called list virtualization, which does some tricks to speed up the loading of data from that standpoint there. So I'm not sure if it showed me pointing at the paginate data, but that's on the first data source page on the list control. So the other things, and so let me know when we're at list properties, when it catches up to list properties. And it may take a moment to do that.
You've clicked on delay render till visible?
Good. So yeah, that's where it is. So, you can either paginate on the first bit. The other is, and I'll look at virtualization in a moment, but this is one that's nice. It says delay render till visible or delay render until explicit refresh. So often one method is to have your filter criteria on one page and then your list are on one UX or one panel card and your UX on or your list control on the other panel card. Once you enter the thing, you navigate to that panel card, it'll say, oh, guess what? This list is visible. So now I'm going to go ahead and grab the data and render it. So that is one trick to be able to say, enter some data and then go to there and show it there. The other is something called delay render until explicit refresh, where it will go ahead and display the basic list structure, but it won't render that whole list for you until you say go. And that's another way where you can do that programmatically. You can say, okay, go ahead and refresh this list, and it now will show values in it. Now, again, both of those methods are kind of not showing anything until you go in there. So what you can use is actually a third method, which is pretty cool, is the following, is that you can, and I'll have to kind of mock it up, but you can create a little piece of JavaScript. This may take a moment to catch up. And there is a JavaScript function, and when it catches up, I'll let you know there. And you can either do it client side or server side. It's really up to you in terms of how you want to do it. But you could use one of these methods, and it'll take a moment for it to refresh and come up. But you can use one of these methods to basically set the filter on a list. So what you can do is say delay. So first and foremost, you would say delay rendering until explicit refresh. Then step 2 is when you load the UX, you would use either filter list client side or set filter. I think you use set filter. I think this is it's a client side there. But you can then emit and set a filter and then say set the filter and refresh that list. And therefore, when they first see it, it's going to have that filtered amount of data. So that'll reduce the amount of data that's actually displayed to the user. But then you still have the ability to run filters using the regular filter functions to go ahead and populate the other pieces from that standpoint there. You'll see here there's a dialog, there's the list object, and then there's the dialog object filter list. And let me go ahead and show you the difference. These are client side, and this other filter list, I think, is server side. So it depends on your implementation requirement, whether you need to do it client side or on the other side. So again, taking a moment to refresh and wake up. I think there's too many people on the network. Yeah, I've lost my connection to the remote PC. You'll see it flicker for a moment, and then we'll come there. So your strategies are A, don't render the list until it's visible. B, don't render it until you explicitly refresh it there. And then the third is look up, and we can find list virtualization, which kind of then is another technique to kind of just speed overall rendering of list information from there. There we go, there's filter list. This filter list, by the way, when it finally catches up, is a server-side query where it'll actually, you put in the parameters and say do it, it'll call the server, get the data, and then bring the data down and update the list. So it really depends on whether you need to do a client-side or server-side. I hope that gives you some pointers and directions on how to go and where you want to go try and implement that.
All right. Oh, we have a question on A5W pages. The question is, how do they work?
Okay, good question. We appreciate that. No, that's good.
Yeah, and to further clarify, they want their question is, do they need to create one for each component, and why is the index name convention used for the A5W page?
First, okay, so I'll answer the second one first. So when you have an index A5W alpha, by default, if you go to that URL without specifying a page, it will load that one up. So it says, oh, that's like your default page on your website. You can change that in the server settings. There are some tricks you can do to kind of modify. You can then maybe make login.a5w. So in terms of being able to create A5W pages, you can create your own A5W pages. It's like HTML. The neat thing about A5W is that you can insert XBasic scripting, which is pretty cool. You can create little scripts and put them into your A5W pages. In terms of requiring one for every component, the answer is no, not necessarily, and that is depending on how you structure it. If you have a system where you have a component and each one's going to be on a separate page, you may go down that road. But what we highly recommend is instead of creating separate UXs, what you can do is in your UX, and this will take a moment to load up, you can create one major UX. So that would be like your primary UX. Then you can use the ability to, you'll see when it catches up in a moment, you can embed, I think, where's embedded UX? I think it's in here. Yeah. You can embed other UXs in that primary UX. So the benefit of that is that you don't necessarily need to create another A5W page for those other UXs. You just create one UX, and in there you can click on a button and load another UX in there, and it will load within the A5W page. You're correct in the assessment that a UX does not exist by itself. It needs an A5W because the A5W page says, oh, I have this embedded UX in this page. I'll go render it and then send it to the person there. But beyond that, when you architect your solution, you don't want to have like 100, components and 100 A5W pages. That gets very complicated over time. What you would rather do is create a single UX and then use the trick of opening, either embedding or opening UXs dynamically into that same UX you're in. And we've done demonstrations sort of like the tabbed UI. Actually, you can use the tabbed UI. You'll notice with the tabbed UI, it will automatically generate an A5W page for you. And then when you're actually adding things into the tabbed UI, it's just loading everything up in that same page from there. A real quick just trick is that if I do want to create a A5W page, I can just open up my UX here and click Save Page, and that will save, it will actually create an A5W page and embed this UX I'm on here into that page. So that's a real quick, nice shortcut. So you don't have to go create a page and embed it. You can actually just go to your UX and say an A5W page from there. So first and foremost, you don't have to have an A5W page for every UX. If you put them, if you combine them via embedding or opening them using Action JavaScript, you're good to go. Secondly, index.a5w is just a nomenclature, a standard that will, when you get to that URL, it'll open that up by default. You can go into your server and modify that. In fact, you can do it on IIS and other things like that. So you can say, oh, I don't want to be index. I can have it be login or some other A5W page. You want to be that sort of default page to open up from that standpoint there. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you. And then sort of related to that, this person has asked, how do they send a link to a page if it's in a UX?
Oh, okay.
I think they're asking
a
how
link
to
to
add
a page if it's
UX.
well, there's a couple of things. I'm not sure I fully understand, but first there's a link control. So I can actually put a UX in there, and actually I'll just use the add control here. And so there's a hyperlink, actually it's hyperlink. So you can actually click on that and that will insert a link, and then you can go in and set that, what page it opens up. Now, one of the cool things about that is you can say when they click on that link, do I want to open it up in a new tab in my browser, or I can actually open it up within my UX into a panel card or other method there. So there's some really cool tricks you can do from there. I'm not sure if I answered the person's question correctly, so they may want to, validate it with us, but that's the ability to add a link into there. Conversely, you can create in a panel card, you can actually have it display another A5W page. There's a lot of tricks around that, able to do that. So I hope I answered your question. Not sure.
Oh, no, they've sent clarification asking how to give a link to someone to get to their component.
Well, in that case, then you most likely you'd need to do one of two things. You would embed that component in A5W and then give them the link to that A5W page when it's published. That's option number one. Option number two is programmatically what you can do is you would create like a generic link that would go to like an A5W page. And in there, you could say, oh, it's in this UX and open there. So that I don't have time to go through that there, but you can do some tricks in terms of using XBasic to determine what you're going to actually show, which UX you're going to actually show. You really can't give them a link directly to a UX. You can really only give them a link to an A5W page. But in that A5W page, you could actually have behind the scenes saying, oh, go to this other A5W page if they want this UX, or go to this A5W page if they want this UX. So you could put that in the query parameters, read them out, and then redirect the person. So, but there's no real way to give them a direct link to a UX itself because no matter what, it exists in a UX. Now, one option is the following, is you could create a UX. In that UX, you could have a panel card, and then when the UX loads up, you could take and find out what the URL is given there. And so you give them the same A5W page, but you would give them a query parameter saying target is, or UX is equal to ABC. And then in the onDialog initialize function, you could put code in there to say, when this UX renders, open this other UX inside of this UX in a panel card, which could be the whole screen, and that you use some tricks around how to be able to sort of dynamically display a UX without having to create an A5W page for every UX.
All right, thanks. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our time for the day, Dion. There are
Yes,
a
thanks for
couple more
everybody's
questions.
patience.
Yep. For those of you, if we didn't answer your question, please send it to guides@alphasoftware.com, and we will be in touch. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Dion, for the presentation, and we look forward to seeing everyone at the next webinar.